Hi, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear Descent podcast. I am your co host, Roel Dionisio, and I'm joined with our other co host, Francois Verges. How are you, Francois?
Very good. How are you, Roel?
I'm great. We actually have a special guest on today. Her name is
hmm
Eva Santos, and we just wanted to have a discussion about with Eva and what she does in this industry, and also just provide us with some of her own insights. How are you, Eva?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. Can't complain too much.
Thanks for joining us on the show. Why don't you do kind of a short introduction of yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so these days I'm at Cisco Meraki. My title is Support Product Specialist. And the short way to put what we do is we're the bridge between network support and engineering. So, for example, if a network support engineer discovers something out in the wild they think is a product issue, that usually comes to us divided by products, and we look at it and say, hey, maybe something's wrong with the customer configuration, or oh, this might actually be a product issue. Let's get it sent to engineering and resolve it. Uh, in addition to that, that's the majority of what we do. But in addition to that, we also make recommendations for new products and features and how that will impact our support team. I think that's the short of what we do.
Awesome. Sounds like a busy role. Like you're always busy.
Yes and no. This time of year, beginning of the fiscal year, it's extremely busy, and I'd say mid-fiscal year is also quite busy, but in between, there's a lot of variance. Sometimes things are pretty quiet, and other times, we might have a major issue manifest itself, and it's all hands on deck for a couple days.
Interesting. And how long have you been in that role?
I think I just crossed 2 years last week.
Oh wow. Congrats.
Thanks.
What were you doing before you were in this role?
So I'd say for the past 3, 4 years before that, I was at a couple, two different Cisco partners, MSP type places, doing Wi-Fi deployments, surveys, etc. Most of that time was at CDW. I was at Presidio for a short time, and they both kind of function similarly, where customers request, oh, I want to purchase Wi-Fi services. I need somebody to survey this office. I need someone to deploy this controller and APs remotely. And then I would be the engineer assigned to the project to carry out those services.
How how did you get started in Wi-Fi? Like, did you do networking before, or did you just start with Wi-Fi?
Uh, well, there's a long and a short answer. The short answer is originally just network engineering, network admin type things, and then transitioned into Wi-Fi. The long answer is I was an intern with New York State for about a year, and that was my first exposure while I was getting my bachelor's to network engineering. Before that, I was at like an IT help desk at my college, so just doing, desktop installs, that type of thing. So I had a little bit of IT exposure, but it wasn't until I moved to CDW that I got introduced to Wi-Fi because they, at the time, had a specific need for somebody that they could train into a Wi-Fi specialist. So that's how I ended up discovering Wi-Fi.
And
Did you like it at first, or did you just end up there, by default?
I mean, I had other potential opportunities, but the reason that I went with CDW and just said, hey, maybe I'll try the Wi-Fi thing was because it didn't require me to move out of state. At the time, I was in upstate New York. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but some parts of upstate New York, there's not really a whole lot of jobs. So the fact that, they just wanted me to travel to customer sites and it was a opportunity right out of school with some, basic certifications. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't have really asked for more at the time.
hmm Interesting. So you pretty much started your career with Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Okay.
strange, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Maybe it's nowadays we have more and more Wi-Fi jobs. So But usually people start with, route switching, and then they kind of discover Wi-Fi, and then sometimes they like it, and then they decide to focus on it. Sometimes their boss just needs a Wi-Fi guy, and they end up being the Wi-Fi guy, and then kind of transitioning into Wi-Fi. So it's interesting that you started with Wi-Fi. Do you find it challenging sometimes when you work on the route switching side of things, or not really?
I think switching, not so much, just because part of Wi-Fi troubleshooting, especially at Meraki, I mean,
Hmm.
you have to know your layer two and, your DHCPs and, uh, your VLAN tagging and all those things quite well, spanning tree,
Hmm.
all those things can have an impact on things that happen to manifest as Wi-Fi issues. I think it's more challenging for me having to look at routing also at the same time, especially if it's more complex than just like a simple OSPF network, not a
Hmm.
whole lot going on. If you ask me about BGP, I'd have to go crack open a book and look at advanced route attributes, it's
Yeah.
just not something I have the brain capacity for that I look at regularly. Like I know the fundamentals, like route selection and all that, but if it's really in the weeds, I would probably need some educational assistance.
Hmm. It's the same. It's the same for me. So don't feel bad. Have been out of that for a long time, just focusing on the Wi-Fi. So, um, okay, interesting,
It's hard
interesting.
to know everything because at
Hmm.
least
Oh my
I,
God, don't get me
I,
started.
I like that you mentioned that you have a foundation, you have at least some basic knowledge, and I think that's what's key for a lot of people. And you had mentioned that you need to know your DHCP, your DNS, spanning tree, because I find it hard to identify other strictly Wi-Fi engineers where that's all they're doing. There isn't an aspect to what we do where we're not going to see a DNS issue or a
Hmm.
spanning tree issue. They do manifest as Wi-Fi issues only because most people are just mobile now, so they bring all their devices wirelessly. There's not a lot of Ethernet connected devices as much. What would you
Yeah.
say is the most interesting thing you've seen? Because you deal a lot with support and lots of different customers coming your way. What is the most interesting issue that you've seen? Because I've come across my own fair share of Meraki configurations that people do. I know people do some interesting configurations with their network.
Um, Without divulging anything, I'm not allowed to divulge because there's more of that than not. I think the weirdest support case I've ever seen was they had a network and we got captures because they're saying that all their clients were getting disconnected at the same time. I look and a specific client was sending, like a phone, was sending a mass DAuth frame just to the BSSID. And to this day, I can't really make sense of it. The product they had was I think it was some type of IoT light switch that happened to use Wi-Fi, but didn't primarily use Wi-Fi. There's no Spectrum data whatsoever. I didn't have anything like that, just PCAPs and Meraki logging. And when I looked at it, I was like, how come every time they flip this light switch, this client sends a mass D off to the BSSID? And it was like different clients each time they tried to repro. They're like, oh, yeah, we just happen to test with this phone, but here's another phone doing the same exact thing. I'm like, what is causing these Wi-Fi, I mean, these phone chipsets to send a mass
Yeah,
D off? And I don't know, maybe it's just like a
maybe that's how they
behavior
get
with some of,
access. Yeah.
I don't
That's how they
know,
get
maybe
priority on the network, right? Kick everyone
I
off and then you've got it.
the customer didn't respond in this particular instance. I forgot what
Mm.
happened. They did not engage further for troubleshooting, but if I had to guess, maybe some other odd behavior was happening with maybe the cellular radio. Because,
Hmm.
like I said, it was just one vendor, limited documentation on how their product works at the radio level. So
Yeah.
that was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, and I hope I don't see it again.
Yeah, most recently I came across one that was using a Meraki network, and their issues manifested as Wi-Fi. They had clients that would stay connected to Wi-Fi, but they just didn't have network. And when I started looking into it, I did not see any Wi-Fi issues. I even sent a handheld device, had them run it continuously, could not find the issue. And so I finally asked for a network topology. They didn't have one, so I said, "Hey, let's draw one out." And most customers don't have a network topology, or I mean, with Meraki, you can just kind of build it within there. But I didn't have access to their dashboard yet, so they drew me a diagram, and it was a classic triangle. 2 switches, 3 switches, they're all connected to each other, and it was basically a spanning tree issue where APs on one side were taking a path, but then that path was blocked, and so they created a spanning tree issue. And I didn't go on site. I was just like, "Hey, can you just take that connection off between these 2 switches?" And after that, their issues went away. I don't think I even charged them for anything. I just said, just stop creating loops, and you'll be fine. But that kind of leads me to my next question about the skill sets that we need as Wi-Fi experts, or even just as network engineers. What do you think are the most important skill sets that we need for network engineering today?
I think the exact answer depends on whether you're a consultant helping customers or if you're internal IT. I think for either, I would say the important thing is knowing how to learn something in depth, not necessarily knowing something up an exact protocol, because there's always going to be new protocols, new features, newfangled things that private companies are coming up with to make our lives more interesting. So, for example, if you're able to learn 802.11 really in depth, then if for some reason you have to go troubleshoot a Bluetooth issue, you already know how to get in depth at the physical and data link layer with one protocol. You just need to learn the intricacies and the quirks of this other protocol. You understand the template of how to get up to speed with that. So I would say learning how to learn, because, like you said, it's kind of impossible to know everything. But specifically from a consulting perspective, I guess being able to put yourself in the customer's shoes and understanding how to make things understandable for them that are technically complex. Because, there's lots of knobs and buttons and things in Wi-Fi, but you need to make it relevant and important for them. So, for example, if it's a school, contextualizing, oh, can they get their Chromebooks to work properly? Can an instructor have 30 kids in a classroom without any issue? Just those sorts of things.
Yeah, when you talk about the learn how to learn, I think that's very important. That's kind of like what happened to me when I attended university. Is they gave us so much to kind of learn about that we can train ourselves to learn how to learn. But then it becomes harder to maintain that as you move into the workplace, because now you get busy with work. So it's important to carve out some time to keep on learning new stuff. Even if you're busy, I think it's important, because if you don't, then you can lose the skill.
Yeah.
You can lose that learning skill. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of just-in-time learning as well, because if we are busy, we're not dedicating a lot of time to learning. In the very beginning of our careers, it is mostly learning, right? Going through certifications, reading through the books, and understanding how all of these protocols work. But once you're in the weeds now, there's less time that you have to just sit there and learn something new, unless you really have to, right? Unless it's required by your employer and you have dedicated time. But even for someone like me, I'm not spending time reading books for certifications, as an example, but I will do the just-in-time learning where I'm like, hey, okay, I'm in the middle of this issue and I'm not up to speed with this protocol, and I need to at least refresh myself. And then knowing where to search for that information, how to comprehend it quickly enough, and then apply it to what you're actually doing right now. That is, to me, a a different kind of skill set that you pick up along the way. Did you focus on any certifications in the beginning, or currently doing certifications, Eva?
I feel like I'm always doing certifications. I put a little hiatus just because things are a bit busy right now, but I was working on CW ISE. I'm one test away, and since I have
Mm.
CWNE, the application process is dramatically simplified. So not so much PowerPointing and essay writing this time around. So but yeah, in the beginning, particularly when I was at CDW, they have something called the Associate Consulting Engineer Program, or ACE for short. And in order for me to get through that program, or anybody depending on your track, they kind of run you through a gambit of certifications in that particular technology. So I had to get my CCNA in like a month or two, and then CCNP within 6 to 8 months. When I took it, they were transitioning the test from route switch T-shoot to encore and a specialization. So it took me a bit longer than I hoped, but eventually I got it. But yeah, I think I also took CWNA while I was at CDW, like Ruba certified mobility associate, just like the foundational stuff. And then once I moved on from CDW, that's when I really started targeting CWNE and Wi-Fi specifically.
Wow, you have a lot of certifications.
Yeah, I'm not using them all.
And I think you mentioned not using them all, because I see a lot of people trying to enter the IT industry, and they try to get all the certifications they can get their hands on. If you were to look back into how you started, what would be the certifications you would pick to get you where you are today?
I'm not sure, just from an employability aspect, I would have changed much because the bachelor's program, I finished the rest of my degree online, but it was sort of like a hybrid, work experience, college credit type of thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Western Governors University.
Yes, I
Uh,
am. For those who don't know, Western Governors is they put a lot of the certification programs into the curriculum, so it's kind of like how you progress within Western Governors and get your degrees. You get these certifications along the way. Is that accurate?
yeah, that's exactly right. So I was in the information technology track, so they had me take A plus, Net plus, Security plus, etc. I don't think all of them were extremely pertinent, but particularly the core A plus, Net plus, Security plus, for getting an entry level job, that was key. I
Okay.
would say there were some other ones like Linux fundamentals. I didn't feel like was in depth enough to really be significant in applying to jobs. There was like a project one, there was like a cloud fundamentals test, just too many to name. But those three, I think, are the ones that come up most often in entry level networking jobs.
Okay. And do you think the A plus is relevant today for network engineering? I took it a long time ago when it was still a lifetime certification. So I guess I could put that in my signature that I have the A plus.
Yeah, the one I took is definitely not current, but I think I think having just a basic idea of how hardware products are built and constructed, and levels of software and operating systems, going from kernel to OS to, applications sitting on top of an OS. I think that's helpful to know. I couldn't tell you about SSD or HDD drive sizes, but there are some things in there that I do find helpful if you didn't happen to have that exposure, doing like IT help desk as I did.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
think if
interesting because yeah, the these certification network A and stuff, I've only started to hear about it, um, like well after I finished school, or I feel like it's very US centric. Maybe it's not, but like in France, I've never heard of this. Like people will talk about
security
the
plus
Cisco,
for
sir.
sure.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna work with like military or DoD, security
Hmm.
plus, I think is a requirement to get?
It is. There's DoD 1, 2, and 3 set of requirements, and each one has certain certifications that will satisfy that requirement. So especially here, because I'm based in the DC area, it might not Security Plus might not even be relevant to what I'm doing, but to have that approval to take a job that works with DoD or some other type of clearance, they often just require it flat out.
Yeah, it's just it's a checkbox at this point. Like, so when you're applying for jobs, DoD, you see Security Plus, you kind of make it past the initial wall.
And so looking in the I had a question for Eva. Looking at the future and how everything is evolving in networking, especially when we start seeing a lot of AI being applied to networking. Where do you think you want to put your focus in the coming years for your learning? Like, do you want to keep on going for the expert certifications, or do you want to maybe discover other fields that could be tightly related to what we do on a day-to-day basis?
So it's been on my mind, particularly since being at Meraki for a bit. I think I have more of an interest in the actual electrical engineering side of Wi-Fi. So signal processing, building the boards, the different components, how they filter and manipulate signals to get them to do what we want them to, and, driver behavior, PHY, firmware, that type of thing. The problem is that if you didn't just go innately into electrical engineering, it's really difficult to sort of work backwards and do electrical engineering type things as an educational pursuit, because they require labs on site and lots of science credits that can't be done online. So I found one or two online postgraduate certificate type programs that just cover signal processing and go a little more in depth, but not an entire degree program. And I don't know when exactly I'm targeting that, but I think that's at the forefront of my mind, is understanding that side of the house a bit more.
Yeah, if you understood that part, I certainly don't. But if you understood that part and have the Wi-Fi experience as well, and the additional networking foundations, I think that would be such a powerful skill set, even for today, because I think most of the issues that I run into nowadays are either related to drivers or how the signal is being processed or propagated out of an antenna. All of those, I tried to go that same route. I even looked at going back to get an electrical engineering degree, but I just opted not to. But like you, I thought it was difficult to find, going backwards, how to learn this without given a structured approach to it. And that's why I thought, university would be the best way to go, because it's already structured for you. You get all the right classes in the right order. Because I went and borrowed a book on electrical engineering, and I was like, okay, I'm returning this after 5 days. I can't comprehend it.
Engineering materials got you down.
Yeah, it's not quite the easy to read, right? It's not like a CWNA, where that textbook to me is a lot more easier. But I guess if you start reading standards, it starts to get a little bit more, you get more familiar with it, because the standards, 802.11 standards are quite complex reading it. Francois has done a good job at, deconstructing that and the algorithms they add into it.
I mean, that's how it started, is I had to check the standard to see if, for example, Meraki products are doing things the way that we're supposed to. And the way everything's written, it's like an electrical engineering guide, the schematics and the flow diagrams, that's how they're structured. So I was like, well, MLME, what phi this, phi that, what does all this stuff mean? And, I start to find out from some of our development folks, on the MR software team, that there's this whole Pandora's box of stuff that I've never seen before.
Yeah, so you have access to people then that you could pick their brains on how a lot of this works, not just on the Wi-Fi side, but even under the hood of the AP to really know what it's doing, how it's processing things. That's to me a really interesting way to even learn faster.
It's interesting how you guys gravitate more towards the hardware element. Me, I'm more um, attracted by the software, and I would look up and look more at the software stuff, and the AI and the machine learning type of thing. So interesting how we're
Yeah.
attracted to different things.
So you're saying you don't want to build your own AP, Francois?
I'm not. No, not really. I'll, I'll let you guys do it.
No Francois branded antennas coming soon.
It's but I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not
Okay.
really. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes. Since Francois talked about the software side, Eva, what do you think about API and programmability? Are you doing a lot of that where you are today, or helping customers kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a key component of Meraki dashboard that a lot of customers, particularly large customers with lots and lots of devices, use. And if something breaks, we need to have an answer. So, yeah, I do lots of API testing and, making sure things work as expected and that they can take the amount of devices and requests that are coming through. So, yeah, I would say I have a lot of exposure as far as like where APIs are going to go. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that sound good on paper that when you put the pedal to the metal, they behave differently. And I kind of feel the same way about AI. So I think only time will tell.
Mhm.
How would you help somebody who hasn't done APIs? Like, where would you kind of direct them to go and start learning how to get started there? I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen here that are using Meraki, but probably aren't using it to its full capabilities.
Yeah, I think understanding what an API actually is and what different types of APIs there are is probably the first order of business. I mean, there's different certifications that cover it, but for the most part, you're going to be encountering REST APIs, and at the end of the day, a REST API is an API that uses HTTP for all its functions. So I would say pick something that you are likely to run into, like a REST API, say what Meraki Dashboard or Aruba Central, and learn more about the individual. Try to like break down the components, right? So REST API uses HTTP. Okay, I know nothing about HTTP. Maybe I should go learn more about that because you could try to target a vendor specific implementation of it, but if you don't understand the foundational components and how they all connect to each other, troubleshooting will be much more difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
there's
had
the
that conversation just earlier this morning about having the foundations in place before stepping into the API and automation world, just because you need to know how those function in order to automate them, or leverage API to understand how to configure those items. But sorry to cut you off there, Francois. What are you going to say?
No, I was going to say there's an application called Postman that allows you to kind of create API calls. It's like a UI application. It kind of helps you get all of the components you need. And you can use that to study like they call the HTTP as well, because it gives you like the error codes. You can see all of the requests that came out. You can see the structure of them, and you can also import all of the API endpoints that a specific vendor supports. So it's you don't have to rewrite all of the URLs all the times. You can just import that and then try different API calls, study what you get back. When it works, great. When it doesn't work, why? And you can kind of use that tool as a way to learn the RESTful APIs. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have Meraki, the Postman app, there is a Meraki collection that you could import and be able to see what all the different API GET requests are. I would start there. Use a GET request so you don't mess anything up. But you can just pull information down. I'd be curious. Or yeah, you don't want to delete sites and orgs. No, that's no.
Then you'll be calling deleting. Us, right?
Yeah, yeah. We'll be calling Meraki support. You might get Eva. She'll hopefully be able to recover whatever you deleted. But I'm curious to know, Eva, if you've used any particular scripts with the Wi-Fi side of things on the Meraki dashboard. Is there anything useful that you could share that maybe I can dive into and start using?
Yeah, actually, I probably did this more when I was deploying live customer networks at CDW and Presidio, but you could make, let's say, a simple Python script, let's say, to go through a CSV file of names and ports and, attributes for every access point and have it iterate through that CSV and then push post requests for each access point to change those values. I think that's the most helpful because a lot of times, especially when designing networks, you might decide on a naming scheme and say, oh, we're going to say building, floor, AP number, whatever, and it's all listed in a file, with their locations and any notes and ports and where they're supposed to go and MDFs and IDFs and all that fun stuff. So it's really about targeting those really tedious tasks where you don't want to be going into dashboard and renaming one AP at a time. That would suck for 400 APs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And likewise, I've done that with Aruba Central too. And Aruba Central, you can also find ways to plot APs on maps. I haven't figured out. It's been a long time, but I haven't figured out how to auto plot things on each map, but I remember renaming APs and plotting their locations were the two things that took me the most time, where maybe I would leverage a small Python script.
Yeah, that's useful because there's been many projects where you go through a whole renaming, or maybe somebody added all the APs and it's like, okay, now we need to rename them because they're all just MAC addresses, and so the script could easily save you hours instead of having. I've done that where you're clicking one by one, typing in the name, going back to the previous page, typing in the name again. Yeah, there are better things we can do than spending hours renaming, especially if you've got multiple sites multiple network sites that you have to change names for, and scripting will definitely help get you there faster. Well, Eva, I want to thank you for joining us here on the podcast and sharing your experience and what you do and some tips that you've given to people. Is there anywhere people can find you online that they can go and learn more about you or learn more about your experience?
Yeah, I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I do have a blog at refrizzy.com, linked in my LinkedIn. I don't really do Twitter or X as they call it these days. I'd say, yeah, those are the two places you can find me.
Awesome. We'll include a link to both of those locations on the show notes page. But we do, again, want to thank you for joining us and taking some time out of your day. I know you probably have some support tickets you might need to get back to, so we'll give back some time and just want to thank you again.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Eva.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye, everyone.